Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to a special creator interview with a longtime friend of ours, Tyrell Cannon. Will be joining the show in just a moment to talk about his comic book, ERIS, which we've gotten to read. It's fantastic. And if you know anything about this man's artwork, you know that this book in particular is you're going to be in for a really big treat. So before we get to that, make sure you go to Hops Geek News on any podcasting platform, any social media platform, and just like, subscribe, share, follow, help the podcast grow. We have been doing a lot of Comic Cons this year, doing a lot of traveling this year. You can probably find me at Free Comic Book Day down at Sailfish, which is my brother-in-law's shop in Concord, North Carolina, this upcoming Free Comic Book Day, which is also May the 4th weekend. Always going to be a good time. And then I will probably also be at Tidewater Comic Con in June, and then San Diego Comic Con coming up in July. So with that said, Lauren, how you doing over there? Long time no see. We haven't done this in a little while. I was on vacation,
I
so
guess we
welcome. It's
haven't.
nice to see you over there. How you doing?
I'm doing good. It's been a week, but I'm holding on. I'm excited to get to talk comic books and all fun things tonight because it has been
Yes,
a week. So
it has. It has. And our friend is returned. Tyrell, welcome back to the show. It was great to see your name pop up in the email, and it's always a good time getting to look and read what you're doing over there. So how have things been since we've last gotten to chat?
Busy, it's funny because I always feel bad, when I reach out to people because with comics there's all these big gaps of time, and so it seems like, no one knows what I've been doing, or I haven't talked to anybody in forever, and then all of a sudden you're like, I got all these things. So it's been a very busy time. It's crazy because a lot of the projects I've been working on I haven't been able to talk about yet, and hopefully I will soon. But one of them I can talk about is ERIS, which I've been getting ready for a while now. I mean, I've been working on it for 5 years, but the last few months have been coloring it and getting it lettered and getting it ready for the Kickstarter. So a lot of that, but I've also done some shows. We were discussing earlier, I was at C2E2, and I've done some covers for some comics and some commissions, just doing the art thing over here and having a family, all that kind of stuff.
Well, you also do weekly YouTube shows as well, which are great. You get and you draw, and it's a really good time. So what started that? I know it's been going on for quite some time, but we've never really gotten to chat about that. And
Yeah,
for anybody who
I
might not
started.
know,
Yeah, I started doing those around the time the Schlub was coming out, and it's not always as consistent as I'd like to be, but I try to get a couple times in every month on Tuesdays with Tyrell. And it's just a thing that when I originally kind of started doing comics full time, in my head, I thought, well, I'm going to start live streaming, and I'll have the time to do that. And then we had our daughter, and I didn't really have time to do that. But now she's about 5, and the time is starting to ease, come back a little bit. So
yeah.
I started doing these, and they're really fun. I usually, last week, what I did on this Tuesday was a recap of C2E2. But a lot of times what I'll do is I'll pull books out of my collection, whether they be art books, mini comics, old comics from my childhood, new comics that I picked up this week, go through them, talk about it, take questions from people, get people's thoughts, and then sneak peeks of work that I'm working on. And then almost every time I'll try to do a little ink drawing. And those usually end up in my shop for sale or in my portfolio for sale at shows. And it's really a good time.
Really
We try to have some good vibes over there, I try to keep it kind of Bob Ross over there on my channel.
Oh yeah, it's a nice break from real life. Like we were all talking about the craziness of having a family and traveling and work and everything like that. So it's always a really good break to get to just hang out. And you're right,
Yeah.
good vibes, man. It's always fun and very Bob Rossy. Yes.
And what's the handle for that for anybody who wants to follow
Yeah.
along with that?
If you go to YouTube and just search for Tyrell Canyon, you'll find it. But I think my actual channel is a /Uber Artist, UBERARTIST. But yeah, if you go over to my YouTube channel, like, subscribe. I think I'm getting close to 1,000 subscribers.
Yes.
So please come on over and help us reach that. And yeah, it's usually on Tuesdays. Occasionally I'll do a different night, but it's almost always Tuesdays in the late evening. So I get a lot of people on there that are also working artists that are working on their stuff, and we kind of hang out together and work. It's a really fun time.
Nice. That sounds awesome.
So Lauren, why don't you take us into a brief synopsis real quick of the book that we're getting to kind of dive in, speaking of comic book worlds, and take us for a spin before we dive into the questions.
So this book is currently up on Kickstarter. So I've just pulled basically this description from Kickstarter. And you say this is the complete collection of a brutal psychedelic sci-fi action. So it's a sci-fi action comic exploring violence, Power, violence, and consciousness. It captures the energy of 90s comics, the thought-provoking formalism of alternative comics, and the excess of 80s action films. And you can absolutely see that. Matt and I got to take a look at it. You can definitely see those things, and it is definitely action-packed and colorful and absolutely beautiful. And I'm not sure how you're able to just slaughter a whole page of people and have it look beautiful, and not in an Invincible way, because when Invincible does it, you have to like turn away. The way you do it, it's like I have to turn away, but I can't turn away because it's so
There's some really creative ways. Yeah, I just picture you sitting there over it, be like, each kind of way.
But yeah, so the story, well, actually, why don't you tell us a little bit about the story? Like, it's a dystopian future kind of story, but these are very unique characters. We have a very divided society, but there's also something called the root that has taken root into the mind of everybody.
Yeah, that's definitely, you know, the quick and dirty version there. I think that when I think about the comic, you know, the genesis of the idea for me had a lot to do with ideas about power and violence and structures of oppression. And so that was kind of a jumping off point. And the other jumping off point for me on the artistic side was, how can I portray motion and battle and sort of alien worlds in a way that is hopefully feels fresh and interesting and different. I'm always trying to push myself to move action scenes a little further down the road and help the comics medium stay kind of fresh in regards to that stuff. And so those were kind of the jumping off points for me. And one of the ways I describe it is it's kind of like Apocalypse Now in space, in that you have these guys on a team on a mission to go find a rogue agent that is, you know, upset the powers that be. And the powers that be want to bring this person in or get rid of them. And they also want to gain control of this substance, which you mentioned, called root, which is a drug that we don't completely describe, but what it does is it can enhance the user's abilities. So that's how our team of I guess they're not really protagonists, but our team of bad guys, the good guys, the guys we're with, are enhanced by it. But it can also be used to control the population and sort of numb their consciousness and make them more into herd animals. And so that's why the powers that be want to have it. And so the Archon Circle rules the planet Earth and all of its territories. And they live high in the Andes Mountains in a cryogenic spheres. And they are not good people. They're the kind of people that, you know, run countries and ruin them and take power away from the rest of us. I think we can all relate to some of those feelings. And so this team is on this journey to the edge of the universe to stop this rogue agent Bosch and get the source of root. And one of the main characters is named Jubal. He's the youngest member of the team. And as they carry out their violent mission, he starts to have these dreams that make him question why he's involved in this and what his part is in all of this. And so that's sort of the main kind of turning point in the story, is how he addresses his feelings and responds to these dreams that he's having.
He was definitely, I think, the character that stuck out the most for me. And I kept expecting the story to go one way, and it did not go that way. So obviously I don't want to say how it went, but it was, you know, seeing those nightmares and everything, you almost start to feel for the guy, and you're just like, oh, this has got to go a certain way. And it didn't. And, you know, you said you wanted this to be a fresh idea. I will say this was a story like none other that I've ever read. Same. Even the way they traveled, which was actually kind of gross.
It was, like the way you were even...
But it was very creative.
Yeah, the way you drew it and everything. There was a lot of... I'm a texture person, and as I'm reading it, I'm just thinking of the texture of it. It was so gross. Like, how did you come up with the traveling idea is one of the big ones I had.
Well, there's a couple things as I started the project and worked on it with my brother that we've seen a lot of sci-fi movies, and we love sci-fi. We love sci-fi movies. We love sci-fi comics. And you know, I'm not going to ever say that something like Aliens and Starship Troopers isn't awesome, right? But
100%.
felt like we've seen that stuff so many times that the last thing I wanted them to do was to jump into a spaceship that looks like a gun and get into
cryotainer,
right? I wanted that to be unique every way they did it. And so we had a few different elements for travel. One of the first ones you see is called grav sleds, which are these tubes that go all the way through the planet to different spots. And the guys it's like a gravity tube that uses sort of like magnets to push them through. And that'll take them all the way up through an elevator that goes to a space station. So rather than launching a rocket into space, they have these things tethered to the planet that go up to these space stations. And then from there, they get sprayed with some kind of goop, and that allows them to ride a laser beam to another station. And so a lot of this stuff is, ideas that, some of them are based in real science, but a lot of them are more fantastical and just based on sort of a visceral reaction. And so things like the sprayed pink that goes on them, or later on they end up in an orange goo that solidifies. I wanted all the travel to feel very tactile and very, not people encased in metal. Now they do end up on a spaceship at one point, but I wanted the spaceship to look like graffiti, not like a spaceship. And so we tried to keep a lot of the ideas about travel kind of something that was just one more little element, right? That's like, you could read 100 sci-fi books and in 99 of them, they're going to be in spaceships. And so how can we do something a little bit different? So that was kind of the reasoning behind those things. And like I said, I mean, we have these characters that are mostly nude. And so I thought anything to play up that, goo or, spray and wetness on them, whether that be blood or these other things, would always be a plus, I think.
It really was. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned your brother, and I noticed it said Logan Cannon.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, this must be a family affair. So how did that come about? Does your brother also write comic books?
He writes comics with me, but he is an actor, actually. So he lives in the Pacific Northwest, and he's been an actor for a while now, and he's doing it full time now, and he's got some great gigs. He's in a bunch of national ads right now, and he's really going for it. He's in a bunch of movies. I just saw him getting murdered by a werewolf in a movie recently. So
that's really cool.
Werewolf.
I would love to see my brother get murdered by a werewolf.
Recently came out with Frank Grillo. That
he's not in that one, but there's a surprisingly large number of werewolf movies coming out this year. So
I'm all about werewolves. So that's like, I'm loving that the werewolves are coming back.
But yeah, he studied acting and writing, and he's written some screenplays and things like that. And we've collaborated on some mini comics in the past just for fun. And when I originally started ERIS, I was writing it by myself, and then it kind of fell to the wayside for a while. And then I picked it back up around the time I became full-time comics artist and made it my sort of project to work on between paid projects. And at that point, I sort of realized I had done a lot of comics before that, but I realized the kind of comic I wanted to do with this needed a little extra help with things like dialogue and pacing. And those aren't always my strong suits. And so I thought, well, why not bring someone else on, and why not bring my brother along? I like his writing. And so I got him involved when I was starting the first issue. And then he kind of became another driving force between, not just helping me refine the scripts, but bringing in fresh ideas and stuff. And it's really fun to work with him because, we're about a year and a half apart. And so we have all the same cultural touch points. So it's easy for me to be like, they grab hands like in Predator, or, he says this line that's kind of like an Arnold Schwarzenegger line or whatever. And my brother knows exactly what I'm talking about. So it's really fun.
I got a lot of...
Did you both grow up big into comics?
Yeah, pretty much.
I just asked if you both grew up into it.
Right. We both, I have an older brother too. That's about five years older than me, and an older sister too. But my brothers and I, around the time I was maybe 11, we started going to the comic book store every week together. And it was right when Image came out. And so what we did is each one of us called different series. Like, I'm getting Wildcats, right? And my other brother's like, well, I'm getting Spawn. And then my other brother's like, well, I'm getting Youngblood. And so we all bought different series. And for a while, we kind of all were buying comics and reading them. And then over time, the other two kind of fell out of it. And I kind of kept buying them and became obsessed with them. Now, Logan still buys them off and on. And my older brother will buy my comics, and a few other ones. But I kind of became the comic book guy of the brothers. So, yeah.
That's too funny. Yeah. How did the acting, so you and your brother get this, how did he bring his craft from the art, the acting world? How did that play into everything you guys created in this comic book?
Well, a lot of the stuff that I've done is kind of, I studied sort of fine art in school, and my stuff tends to be a little more experimental, and that's really fun. And I like to make work like that. But something that's always been hard for me to get down on the page sometimes is those emotional beats and those like lines of dialogue that fit the characters. And so that's something he brings really easily and really well, because as an actor and a writer, but as an actor especially, those are the things he's connecting to when he reads a script or when he looks at a movie. And so those are the things he kind of has this deeper understanding of, whereas I have more of a surface level of it. And then I bring sort of a deeper understanding of the visual element, right? And so those two things hopefully play together really well. And the nice thing about an actor is that they have to do lots of different kinds of roles. And so when you have to write lots of different kinds of characters, they tend to be really good sounding boards or helpers in regards to that, because they can kind of get inside the heads of the characters and put that, like, emote that. Whereas I have the characters all up in here, but sometimes visually I can get them down, but sometimes knowing how they would say a line, I might, I'll put in the script something like, Jubal has to say this line and it kind of has to feel this way, right? But I don't know what the line is going to be or how he's supposed to say it. And then Logan can kind of come in and say, well, what if he said this or that? And this might kind of help emote those different things. And so it's been really useful to have him along, for this.
Nice. No, what I was saying before about the art, because we fell in love with your art when we saw the Schlub. Anybody who hasn't checked out the Schlub, absolutely go back and check that out from Image Comics. And your art, there's just so much to see on every page. But going to the gore aspect, before you color it, like, is it the colors that you choose that makes it so beautiful? So when it's still black and white, is it more gory in that regard?
Well, it can be. There's pages that are extremely gory in black and white. And then there's other ones that are, not so great. They're all spoilery, the ones I have under here. But, a lot of times with the art, I work on paper on 11 by 17, boards. And like, here's the cover, and so I do everything on paper. And even on the paper, I try to, in regards to gore, there's so many different ways to do it. And I feel like a lot of artists tend to focus in on one way to show it, whether that be outlines or splatters or just color. And I try to use all of them. So there's kind of a layering effect to it, right? Like I'll have shapes that are maybe a blood splatter or an impact point, and then I'll throw some, ink down with a toothbrush, right? And then when I get into the coloring phase, I'll put color holds on top of that, so the splashes look a little more like red. And then sometimes I'll add some digital splashes on there or some color stains on different people. And then the other thing that's nice to do is to add little highlights on them, so it gets that wetness feeling to it or that shiny feeling to it. And that makes the violence have this something that we were really, you mentioned the 90s comics in the description, or 80s movies, where the violence is glorified in a way, but in a way that's sort of, it can have an impact, but there's, like you said, like a beauty to it. And so I try to think of the blood and the gore and the fight scenes as this abstract thing that could be beautiful, outside of the context of the story, but just what are these shapes and how do they play with each other and how do these textures layer on top of each other? And so it's really fun because it never gets old, right? Like you start one issue and you're showing people getting their faces punched off, and then the next one, maybe they're getting cut in half, and then sometimes there's a splatter and sometimes there's a shape, and sometimes the violence is slow and sometimes it's fast. It's almost like the main characters of this book express themselves through their violence, and the society that they're from and the people in control express their power through violence that they inflict on other people. And so the whole thing is about this sort of top-down pushing of violence across everyone,
Well, I mean, when you're in the wrong, you got to take the power physically.
Yeah.
You mentioned a lot of the motions and the blood, the way it comes out. Like some of these, there's some really beautiful pages where it wraps almost like we're looking into a tornado. And the one really cool thing that I've noticed too is you go from the reds and then almost moves into action to where it goes into purples and things like that.
A lot of pink.
Yeah, there's a lot of pinks and
works so well.
It does. So is that something, again, when it transitions into like the pinks and purples, that you have in your mind, or you're just like, oh, this would actually work, and then you blend it into that kind of slicing motion, I guess?
That's really, that's a really astute observation, y'all. And I'm really glad that you noticed those things, because these are the things that I think about and I hope they come across. And yeah, as the book progresses, there's certain colors and themes that play throughout it. And pink is a big one. Pink is sort of root and sort of energy and sort of power. And then there's other colors, like orange and yellow that are kind of heat and home and ground and community. And then other colors that are more like blue, which are colder with less emotion. And as you move to different planets or in different situations throughout the comic, I wanted each situation to have its own sort of unique palette. And part of the trick was to work pink and the flesh colors into all the different areas. And so coloring is something I feel like I've grown a lot as the series went on. I mean, I mentioned this before, but I've drawn this over many years between many projects,
Mm-hmm.
and so I was learning how to color as I did it. And when I did the first issue, I was releasing it online, and after I had finished it and was getting ready to do the Kickstarter, I had a colorist friend of mine come over, Addison Duke, and give me some tips and pointers, and I kind of did a revamp of the colors. And then as I went into issue 2, I tried to build on that and came up with a palette I'm really happy with in the second issue. That's kind of like candy colors is what I think of them. Even though there's all this violence, there's like an orange, yellow, red, pink, and it kind of makes it feel like you're looking at a piece of candy. And then as you get into the third issue, it's sort of the third chapter. It kind of gets very blue and cold in some areas.
I was going to say it gets icy in that one, especially as we go to that final planet before the good cliffhanger that you bring us to. And I got to say too, especially by the third, the way you make these characters move as well. How difficult is that for you? Is it something that now that you've been doing it for so long, it comes naturally? Because I'm going to be really honest, the way you have everybody move so fluidly, and there's also a swiftness to it. I haven't really seen too many people able to do that as well as you have in comic books.
Well, thank you very much. It is something I have worked at, right? I've done a lot of different types of comics, and with each one, there's sort of the subject or the theme that I'm interested in. And then there's the technical aspects that I want to improve upon. And so I've done other comics with like no fighting in them at all, or with no sci-fi elements at all. But when I got to ERIS and when I started my journey as a full-time professional artist, one of the things that I felt I could bring, and that maybe I understood in some ways that I didn't see it as much, was pushing how much images on a 2D plane, black and white images or black and white with color images, can feel like they're moving or they have impact or energy coming out of them. It's this crazy magic trick. And when you see it work in comics, especially, it's incredible, right? You see a character get punched and that punch feels like a punch, and it's just lines on paper, and it's crazy to me. And so that's something that I really started to focus on and develop some of my own techniques and indicators of how to show speed. And so in ERIS, there's characters that they're all fast, but some are faster than others. And so how do you show the difference between one guy who's fast and another guy who's fast? And how do you show that motion? And sometimes it's a matter of blurring a limb. Sometimes it's a matter of showing them move across a space in less panels than another character. And sometimes it's a matter of showing them move without even seeing them in the panel. They skip panels because they're so fast. And then you get towards some of the stuff at the end, and there's characters that almost are ephemeral. They can't even.
I was about to say they're like blurring almost, and that's the ones that stand out, because I'm like, how the heck is he doing this?
It's magic.
I watch a lot of anime, and I try to take what I see in things like anime, or I watch action movies like The Raid and Jackie Chan.
Oh yeah,
and they have motion and editing and sound. And so the trick is not just to take a screenshot of a Jackie Chan movie, because that's not really going to do it. That's not going to tell the story. But how do I show the motion that, say, an anime character, Vampire Hunter D goes through? How do I show that on a 2D plane with a single image or a series of images? And it's sometimes I don't even understand how I'm doing it. It's just a matter of kind of you keep pushing things a little further, and you try to follow your intuitions. And I look at what other people do too. But it is something I feel that I do bring that is very me. So,
well, another thing you've done that is pretty neat is in the Schlub, you filled it with Easter eggs. I remember you telling us you had things that only like you would pick out, or somebody that you have a close relationship would pick out. So were you able to do any of that in ERIS?
In some ways, yeah. So in the Schlub, a lot of it was, street signs named after my friends, or hot dog stands that I used to go to, or just goofy jokes in the background, funny names on the cereal, that kind of thing. In ERIS, it's a little more integrated into the whole world. So I would still say there's things that I would call Easter eggs in there, but they're more things that I'm hoping you see on repeat readings, and it enhances your the way you take in the story, right? And so there's not a lot of funny stuff in there. There's a couple little funny things that I don't think anyone will get, but a lot of it is things like, oh, wow, now I see how this panel in the first chapter relates to this panel in the third chapter. Or, oh, I see how there was this giant battle, a 2-page spread. There's quite a few of those in the book. And maybe at some point you'll see, oh, this is where that ball that Coil threw went. And then here it went over here, and then it went over here. And so it becomes more like a Where's Waldo experience that hopefully kind of, enhances the overall effect of the book. I want people, even though there's not a ton of words in the book, I want people to reread it for the visuals and start to understand the visuals deeper as they go through it some more. I think that I like comics that have a lot of density to them, because I think one of the amazing things about a book especially is that, just like anything else in media, the more, every time you read it, you're a different person and it changes. But with comics, it's a very cerebral and personal thing. You're deciding how fast and slow to read it when you come back to it. And so it's even more of a, I get so much more out of rereading a comic than I do looking at any other piece of media, really, because, there's an intimacy to it. So,
yeah. And it is very true with you, choose how quick you go over that art or whether you stop and look around. And you have a few pages where there's no dialogue. So you have to stop and take in, what the art is so that you can see what's going on. And I mean, why else do we read comic books if not to enjoy the art alongside the story? So yeah, those pages were absolutely gorgeous.
Thank you.
I thought you were going to ask a question, Matt.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, basically, we don't want to ruin what happens in book 3, but it really sets up, very, like Lauren said, it was a vast departure. I did not see it coming that way. So what kind of tease about what's coming on the horizon and kind of what happens in that book for those who have not read yet, or maybe they have read?
Yeah, well, the third chapter, I mean, I see this as a complete thing, and it's sort of a culmination of the story that we had planned from the beginning. Some things changed along the way, as they always do. I think I originally thought it was going to be 12 chapters, and it was going to be all these little side things. And as you work on a project, it changes and you change. And I try to welcome that. And so what ended up happening is, as we got to that third chapter, there was a lot of things that I felt like, if I can focus on these elements and these visual elements and these story elements, we can really have something here that wraps up in a way that I feel satisfied with. Now, it's not a comic that is going to give anybody really straight. My daughter's counting and they're very loud there. I don't know if you can hear that. It's not going to give a lot of straight answers. I like books that have some mystery, because, again, as a reader, I like stuff that makes me think, well, maybe if I go look at it again, I'll get it a little deeper. And if I look at it again, I'll get a little deeper. And so we try to leave a lot up to interpretation, but really, what I wanted to do as people got towards the end was to feel like the Jubal character started to really feel differently than he did at the beginning. In the beginning, he's kind of on board. He's a team member. And towards the end, he starts to get more and more separate. And as they get closer and closer to their goal of finding Bosch, the types of people that they encounter and how they encounter them changes. You see at the beginning, they encounter resistance soldiers, and it's kind of a small threat for them. They take care of them quickly. That was a very stereotypical looking characters, right? And then they find these gangs, and the gangs are kind of, a community, but it's a loose community. And then you go to the second chapter, and there's these farmers that have generational families that care about their environment that they're in and the people that they are with, and a whole religion built around it. And then as you go into the third chapter, you see more of a cult situation where, instead of it being a community of people that care about each other, it's a community of people that serve somebody. And so, they face these different communities, and they're facing them as a team or a community. And so they affect those communities that they face, obviously, by wiping most of them out. And then it affects them as well as a team as they go through it. And so, I'm hoping that all the tiny little bits of character that you get from everybody in chapter 3 or in chapters 1 and 2 kind of come together in chapter 3. And so when certain characters either, rise above a challenge or meet their demise, you have feelings about it. And some of the feelings could be like, yeah, man, screw that guy, I'm glad he's gone. Or, some of them might be
there are some very much of those satisfying. Yes.
Yeah. Some satisfying deaths, So yeah, I mean, as we got into the third chapter, I really wanted to have something that was the biggest battle I've ever drawn, and then also a one-on-one battle that was everything I think it can be in a comic. Not just a couple punches on a couple pages, but how can you really show the intensity of this conflict between many, and then this conflict between just two.
Hmm. Yeah, and even when was it the High Council, the spiritual leader person, that went a totally different way than I expected that to go too, because you just have these certain, I don't even want to call them tropes, because they're not tropes. I feel like tropes are something that people will do that's easy to get out of, but just what we kind of expect from certain, whether it's a spiritual leader or something like that, there's certain kind of expectations we have, and that did not follow that expectation either. So,
Right.
and there was a few laughable moments too. There was a couple giggles in there as well with these characters thinking they're all funny and attractive and whatnot. So that
Yes.
made me laugh as well.
Yes, I hope there's a little bit of humor in there. It's sort of 80s action movie hero kind of humor, right? Where there's a lot of jokes that are at the expense of other people, or a lot of ribbing back and forth. The team of the ERIS Vanguard kind of is more to be a sports team, boys club kind of a feeling,
Yeah.
And some of us have been around that. And some of the ideas that I put out there, I do want them to kind of start out as something that maybe you feel a little bit familiar with, but I like to turn it on its head, because, it might not be the best thing always for marketing, because I think people like the comfort of knowing where things are going, but this is a dangerous world that they're in. And I don't want things to feel like the sacredness of those things is kind of sucked out of it. Right. No matter how much somebody thinks they're right, or they believe what they believe or whatever, in this world that these guys inhabit, that's controlled by these evil folks, that's all out the window. And sometimes that's hard to see, and other times it's really satisfying to see.
Right. See, I always want what I think is going to happen to be wrong. I always love being surprised. Unless everybody thinks I'm crazy for my prediction and it ends up being right, then I'm happy. And
you
that's
guys make pretty good predictions on your show. I mean, I've seen you guys usually have a pretty good eye for what's coming. So,
well, I mean, that's if you have a blueprint of a comic book already ahead, maybe. But
sure.
Outside, I mean, I could not write a story. I've never even tried to write a story. I kudos to you for being able to write and draw. So,
thank you.
It's incredible. So I know as we're recording this, there's 19 days left. You guys are just about there to the mark. What kind of upcoming conventions, where can people, other than the Kickstarter and your social media accounts, where can they find you in person, potentially upcoming?
Yeah, well, I mean, I encourage everyone to definitely check out all the social medias. I'm T Cannon Comics and everything. And of course, you mentioned my YouTube channel, and I've been trying to do ERIS specific things on my YouTube channel this month. I was just at C2E2 this last weekend, so that was a great place to find me. Unfortunately, the next show I have is in June. I'll be at the Chicago Alternative Comics Expo here in Chicago, and so that will be in the end of June. It's here in Chicago at the Irish American Heritage Museum, and it's an awesome show. It's more of a indie self-published show, and I'm going to have some special things there that are only going to be at Cake. So those are the best places to see me in real life. And then I'm doing some podcasts like you guys. And then this Friday, I guess tomorrow, I'll be on Danny Warren Johnson's YouTube channel doing the Friday with D-Dubs with him. And we're going to do a deep dive on ERIS and talk art and do a lot of stuff there. So that's another great place for people to come, check out what I'm up to.
Oh, that's going to be rad. Two really amazing artists come together. That is amazing right there. And it's always great to get to chat with you, because your artwork is one that I know we absolutely love. I've got so many. I've got the ash cans of Schlub, for example. I've got a lot of different versions of Schlub up there with different, artworks and colors and everything, just because it's such a fantastic time getting to see what you go into, because like I said, the coloring, the way you're able to craft your motions and everything going on, it really is next level. And so when I know your name is on a comic book, I'm going to enjoy it without a doubt. So I really appreciate you reaching out to us, hitting us up. And for everybody out there, please go get on this. Yeah. I mean, get on this. And really thank you for coming and hanging out.
Thank you guys for having me on. And I really do hope people are intrigued enough to go check out the Kickstarter. It's ERIS, the complete collection. It is on Kickstarter right now. And I just posted an update today with some cool pinups that some of our friends did for us. And we have some great unlocked rewards that will be unlocked if we go past our goal. We're going to do some printing upgrades. We're going to do a source book in the back. And then one of them is an alternate cover by Danny Warren Johnson. So I'm hoping we can crush that goal and move through into those whatever they call them, stretch goals.
Yes, absolutely. So go out there, support this, guys. Come on, comic books. We are living in such a good time for comics. You don't have to, you can get them from everywhere now. For example, the Kickstarter campaigns, which are all linked. Everything is linked in this episode. And if I missed anything, then Lauren will yell at me and I'll fix it. So guess what? It's going to be there. Guaranteed. And for everybody out there listening, thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. As always, we will be back again with another great episode, but make sure right now the only thing you need to do is go right over there into the link in the bio, get this book, and go see what Tyrell's out there doing. So once again, Lauren, thanks for hanging out. Tyrell, thanks again for coming on and hitting us up, and we will talk to everybody again soon. Cheers, everybody.